as the dominant species of life on Earth would be extinct within a year.
And they have been the entire time.
Johnny, it's great to see that something's going to be done to help Africa generally get out of this endemic poverty trap. Well, you may think that way, Johnny, because Joe Biden has just finished up on a big meeting where all the African countries' leaders were invited to the White House and they had a big bloody chat and a conference and all that.
African summits, you've seen them in Paris, Brussels, Beijing, Ankara, for only the second time ever, Washington. After 2014, the Biden administration hosting an Africa Leaders Summit with superpower rivalries heating up. There'll be no long lectures forecast on human rights and corruption. Instead, Washington bowing to the African Union's own blueprint on sustainable growth.
President Joe Biden is trying to catch up with all the time and influence the U.S. has lost in Africa.
And Joe told them how much America appreciated them all, and that though things might have been a bit shady in the past with America, he was going to ensure that the US gave them every support. Surely it's a good sign, Johnny, these big countries coming together to work in unison to help drag Africa out of the bloody poverty. Well, I reckon that sounds like fucking bullshit.
He's not joking.
What do you mean by that? Now, no one seemed to be worried about these bloody countries over there, Johnny, that have endured unending, it seems, poverty. And the Ask Johnny channel has been a champion of African poverty for quite some time. And all of a sudden, China and Russia seem to be bloody taking a unusual interest in exerting their influence in these African countries. Jesus Christ, Johnny! And America, being America, took a look at this bloody particular behaviour from these two countries, China and Russia, and said, hang on a minute, we're not going to just stand by and let those bastards come in and take over the entire African continent. Well, it's just a surprise, Johnny. I really didn't think these three countries involved would be like that.
Look, don't be so fucking stupid.
We better do something and pretend that we're interested in helping them out too. Oh, Johnny, that's very cynical. That's cynical. Surely they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts for humanity's sake. We'll build some railroads and bloody infrastructure for these poor bloody shitbox countries, and we'll get them on side, and we might have Russia or Chinese little satellite countries out there where we can exert our bloody influence throughout the land. Oh, Jesus, Johnny, you're a cynical old bastard. Well, I may well be a cynical old bastard, Johnny, but you have to admit, this is a pretty cynical move from all these bloody countries. Quick, let's get in there first. We'll build some railroads and infrastructure. Are you saying they don't actually want to help them? They're just scared the other countries are going to come in and dominate.
The US-Africa Summit is the biggest international gathering in Washington, D.C. since the pandemic. It is also the biggest push by Biden to save a region as strategically important as Africa from slipping completely out of the USA's hands. 49 leaders and heads of states from Africa have been invited to the summit. The summit comes as a practical attempt at following up on a new strategy document released by the Biden administration for Africa in August. In it, the US stressed the region's importance, pointed out the threats posed by China and Russia, and vowed to extend defense cooperation with like-minded African countries.
So now we got these bloody big three chatting up the African countries and telling them how important they've been over the last couple of 100 years, and that by Jesus, if you need help, you should have came and asked us in the first place. That sort of bullshit. But Johnny, wouldn't the African leaders over there, wouldn't they be awake to this bloody method of the big three countries coming in there and just trying to buy them? Wouldn't they be awake to that? Well, if I was these African leaders, Johnny, I'd be taking advantage of this bloody pathetic situation and playing the countries off against one another, like saying, well, China said they're going to spend $26 billion on a new railway. What can you offer us?
The big powers of the world are all trying to get ahead of each other in the race to win over Africa. In Africa, the world's biggest powers are playing a game, and Africa is keeping all its options open.
And then go back to Russia and say, by Jesus, the US is going to build an entire city for us. Can you do that for us too?
Why is a continent which has been ignored for decades suddenly becoming a priority?
And just play them off against one another, Johnny. Fuck them, they've had, especially the US has had 150 years to do something about African poverty. Well, all of a sudden, it's this big fucking rush to get into Africa for bloody out of that poverty, and it's done fuck all. Johnny, are you saying that these fucking countries are just gonna go into Africa because they're scared of the other country? Our good friend Jimmy Dore, he spoke to the President of the United States this morning about this very issue.
Hey, this is Jimmy. Who's this?
Jimmy, it's President Joe Biden calling you on the telephone. Glad I got you on the horn.
Same here, Mr. President. What's on your mind today?
The President?
Onward and upward.
What's next on the Biden success docket?
Africa.
Yeah, I see. You're going to go to Africa.
No, man. Jimmy, I'm pleased to be able to say we're hosting the second U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit.
The second annual?
No, second one since 2014.
Okay.
And I'm going to be honest with you, the U.S. hasn't done shit for Africa since. Kept none of the promises. So that will be an action item for the second summit. An autopsy of the failure of the first.
Sounds productive.
Not only that, Jack, we have some tangible shit to offer the Africans this time. First of all, get this. $55 billion in aid to Africa over 3 years.
Well, you're giving an entire continent less foreign aid than you've given the nation of Ukraine.
Will acknowledge that the US has fallen behind as China has surged past American foreign direct investment in Africa. So the US plans to spend some money to win over Africa. And how much money are we talking about exactly? $55 billion. For a continent as large as Africa, that's an insignificant amount of money. It's actually a cruel joke. The US is following a piecemeal approach in Africa. Just to put the $55 billion in perspective for you, this amount is being committed to about 49 African nations for a period of 3 years. By contrast, how much do you think the US has committed to Ukraine in just 9 months of the war breaking out? US aid to Ukraine totals $68 billion, and that's hardly where it stops. The Biden administration has asked Congress for another $37.7 billion. If that request is granted, the total US aid to Ukraine in less than a year will amount to $105 billion US. Ukraine is just one country, and it's getting $105 billion within a year. Africa is a continent that has 54 nations, yet it gets just $55 billion over a period of 3 years. This is why the US is losing out to the combined competition that it faces from France, Russia, and China in Africa.
But not only that, we are appointing a special representative for U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit implementation. That's right, you heard me. And if you act now, you will also get a free U.S. promise to get the African Union a permanent seat in the G20. Offer void after 30 days.
Wow! That should really reset U.S.-Africa relations.
It fucking better. Because Russia and China are beating our ass over there. China's building them an entire infrastructure, and Russia's selling them cheap weaponry. We have to reestablish ourselves as Africa's friend, but not make it seem like we are using them as international pawns. It's a delicate line, but I think we can walk it.
At the sub...
Johnny, Jimmy doesn't seem to be too overawed by just getting a random bloody telephone call from the
I
president.
hear you, Mr. President. Well, good luck.
Thanks, Jimmy. I gotta go. We have to sit down and figure out an awkward moment for this summit. You know, like I learned to say a phrase in an African language that none of the attendees even speak. Or have a children's choir sing Africa by Toto wearing, little hats. Oh, I like that one. That'd be Cringe City. All right, Biden out.
Oh, Joe was on top of his game there, you can tell. Now, you may think that the president, by those comments, is fully committed to helping Africa out of the goodness of his heart. But it's got nothing to do with the goodness of his heart. He's just doing it because it's bloody politically motivated. I think you're being too bloody harsh on these three wonderful countries.
Pulling you down into bottomless depths of suffocating horror.